Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Week in Guns, powered by Second Amendment Foundation and brought to you by Patriot Patch Company, VZ Grips, MAF Corporation, and Primary Arms. This show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Matthew LaRosiere, and I'm joined... Well, it seems that my guess that there's some technical issues. Are we undergoing a test?
We're undergoing a test. This is just a test. Follow the spinning rat with your eyes. You're getting sleepy. You want to go into the comment section and you want to type out the numbers on the front of your credit card. And then you want to type out the numbers on the back of your credit card.
And then also, don't forget that wild 5-digit code about where you live.
We need that one too.
We do need
for
that
testing purposes.
Exactly. So it's good to see you again. It's good to see all of you again. Things have been wild in our space for a little bit now. I have got like 3 or 4 cases going simultaneously. I actually last week dispensed with my first red flag order. That was interesting.
A bundle of spiders wrapped in hatred.
Yeah. We did successfully get it knocked down, and we had a very transparently pro-gun judge, so I think I was on easy mode. Hopefully it can stay on easy mode for anyone else in the future. But I have a funny surprise coming for the red flag program in this state, and I think that the state is going to enjoy the little hoops that they have to jump through after I file some papers. But anyway, speaking of little hoops and filing papers, this has nothing to do with the segue, but we are going to talk about one of our sponsors. And which one do you think that is?
Primarily Arms?
It's Primarily Arms. Yeah. If I could just... There it goes. Wow. They got a scope finder. We could use the scope finder to find a 4X, a 3X, or even a 2X scope.
That's true.
The other website is like not working well with me right now, but as usual, we got code FRN. If you guys use that code when you buy the Primary Arms GLX 1-6 by 24 millimeter first focal plane rifle scope with the illuminated ACSS Raptor M6 reticle, you will get a 30 millimeter deluxe AR-15 scope mount for free added to the deal. And be sure to check out firearmsradio.net/PA for the most up-to-date deal. So yeah, thanks Primary Arms. The first thing we're going to talk about is kind of a fresh track to drop from the White House's SoundCloud page, which I'm not sure if the fear mongering has already started in the gun community or if it's just on AR15.com where that type of fear mongering usually happens.
Lingers. Festers.
It grows like a mushroom or some other less appetizing fungus. But yeah, so we've got this has been making the news. Biden is issuing an executive order aimed at reducing gun violence. It's common sense, people. It's common sense.
Commonly.
What do you think?
I think it's very good common sense. I think the old man, he's very wise, and you can tell whenever he speaks how wise he is, and that this is clearly coming straight from his heart. Wisely.
Yeah, so he discussed this latest effort in a speech from Monterey Park, California, where in January a gunman stormed a dance hall in the community near Los Angeles and shot 20 people, killing 11 following a Lunar New Year celebration. The president called the shooting a tragedy that has pierced the soul of this nation. I'm here on behalf of the American people to mourn with you, to pray with you, to let you know you are loved and not alone. This he told the crowd before memorializing each of the victims individually. So yeah, it was good for him to let us know that we are loved before immediately talking about increasing efforts to round us up and lock us in little cages
for our safety, of course.
Yeah, for our safety. So a lot of people are the face of the order and all of the buzz around it says that this is going to increase the number of background checks that people are going to be subject to the greatest extent without going through Congress. Which
they really shouldn't have said that so many times so blatantly, because they in the actual text of the executive order, they say they may even do it through a a rule like the brace rule or the bump stock rule or whatever, like whenever that rule inevitably gets challenged in courts, the fact that from the very beginning you said we're trying to end run to end run the law. I said probably not smart.
No, I think this is nice. Look, pen and phone, all that. So yeah, when the goal, according to this, is to move us as close as we can to universal background checks without new legislation.
You can't. The order. You shouldn't say that.
Yeah, you shouldn't say that. The order also directs federal agencies to improve public awareness and promote the use of red flag laws. The thing we were just talking about that caused a huge problem for my completely innocent client. That's cool. And instructs the Attorney General to release more information about federally licensed firearms dealers who violate the law. And there's a bunch of other stuff in here. And as of course, a lot of you are probably aware that the Biden administration a couple of years back implemented a zero tolerance policy where basically if you're an FFL, you're getting and you have any issues on your books, you're getting a revocation hearing, which is basically what a revocation hearing is that if the ATF determines you have some violations, and what the regulations actually say that are willful violations, they'll determine whether or not your license should be revoked. And so what the ATF has been doing is just saying whenever there is any paperwork errors at all, it is certainly willful, and thus you should have to present a case for why your license should not be revoked. And knowing that the vast majority of the firearms industry is small businesses in the United States, they're issuing revocation opinions on these businesses, knowing that they most likely cannot afford an attorney to challenge that. Because, of course, after you have your hearing with the ATF, your next step is to challenge the decision in your district court, which is very expensive. So basically, this order is telling them to go even harder on FFLs, is what I'm getting from it. And also perhaps to expand the definition of engaged in the business even more, to kind of treat more firearms transactions as if they are, as if you're dealing in firearms and thus need an FFL. So it's a fascinating two-pronged approach, right? It's that if you have an FFL, we're going to revoke your license. And if you want to sell a gun, you should have an FFL.
Right, because the Safer Communities Act, like the big old compromise that for whatever reason GOP senators handed them last year, was they changed the wording in the definitions for engage in the business of selling or manufacturing firearms, and they changed that definition from the reason for your doing this being your primary livelihood, or they changed the definition from it being your breadwinning thing to if your motive is to make any money.
Yeah, a profit motive.
So if you have, so there had been instances of people in the past who like had sold guns where it's like, yeah, they're selling maybe 100 guns at a gun show, but if they only do that once a year, they're not sustaining themselves off of that.
Right.
So if you were to sue them and they had enough money to get a lawyer, no way ATF makes that stick. And so that, that sort of, they'll call it a loophole, but in reality, it's the way the law was very intentionally.
No, because it was intended at targeting firearms dealers. Even though, the Gun Control Act, ab initio, from the beginning, was wildly unconstitutional. I also have a video coming up on what was the impetus for the Gun Control Act, and I think you guys are going to be a little surprised about what that thing is. I'll give you a hint. It's very small, but this is an effort, exactly like you said, to ram a crowbar into that crack and widen it as much as possible. And then on top of that, there's language in here about ensuring that licensees who do lose their license in the current wild state of revocations will never be able to deal again.
Right.
Which it's just intensely problematic in a lot of ways. And the ultimate result here would be to stranglehold the firearms supply.
Yeah. And the sort of as I was reading through the actual text of the executive order, a couple things stood out to me as like, no one actually advocates for this being a thing except the hardcore anti-gun groups.
Right.
Like like fully doxing the reports where FFLs fail their background checks, or FFLs fail their inspections, and not even necessarily fail, right? Like they have 1 or 2 issues on their books or
violations.
Whatever.
Yeah. So
right.
like, for example, if the dates don't match, if somebody fubs one of the dates, that's a violation.
If somebody forgot to check the "Are you Hispanic or Latino" box, which a lot of
That's a
people tend
violation.
to do, if
Yeah.
if the customer forgot to check that box, you didn't notice it, and then you sold them the gun, technically that's a violation.
If the gender doesn't match that of their driver license,
That's a violation.
it's a violation.
And so there's I think it's Brady, the gun control group, the Brady organization, in the past has, I think it was through FOIA requests, got information on violations from the ATF. And so like they're the only common people who are in support of gun control because assault weapons are scary or whatever. They don't want to know about FFLs that have violations. So like it's very obvious that the anti-gun organizations have the White House's ear on these issues.
Right.
And so like it seems more like this wasn't something that anti-gun politicians dreamed up. It was something that anti-gun lobbyist groups sort of dreamt up.
No, it's certainly a long play, in my opinion.
And I think it was this week, if not, it was late last week. Thomas Massey had a hearing, essentially talking in Congress, talking about how the executive agency has become where lobbyists go, and it should never have worked out that way.
No.
That if lobbying was to happen in government, the lobbying was supposed to be of Congress because they're the ones who are supposed to make laws. But our executive agencies have run so rampant, and it's so obvious that our executive agencies have run rampant that lobbyists don't waste their time going to Congress anymore.
I'm almost surprised it's taken this long. For almost 2 decades, the most rapidly expanding area of compliance was regulatory. What companies have to spend money on to stay legal has been regulatory compliance, and that has expanded year over year for decades. It kind of seems like it's taken a while for them to catch on.
Right. And the being best buddies with Congress people doesn't matter so much because they don't do nearly as much as like the executive agency writes the laws now. It interprets these laws that were intentionally worded a particular way to mean something different. And it's, we see it obviously with pistol braces, and we saw it with bump stocks. But like this happens across the board in government stuff. Like if you're ever super bored and want to be a nerd, you can just go and read through some of the rules on the Federal Register. Like the amount of stuff the executive branch just invents more or less out of nowhere is extreme. And it's because intentionally so, it's difficult for Congress to get anything passed and make new laws. It wasn't supposed to be easy for them to do this. But instead of having to go through both houses of Congress and the president and pass review by the Supreme Court if it gets challenged, the executive agencies can just like out of nowhere drop new interpretations of laws that are effectively new laws themselves. And like maybe the Supreme Court will end up reviewing it. But because of how Chevron deference was decided, like, back whenever these regulatory agencies were first clawing their first little bits of power, the Supreme Court gave them a very, very long leash. And they're now like constantly tugging against the end of that leash. And the Chevron deference deference continues to let them get away with this. And it's been reined in last year by the Supreme Court just a little bit.
But they're acting like it hasn't, and so it's going to take more. And I think they're aware, that the courts are not willing to step in and right the ship. So I think they're just willing to find the bitter and bleeding edge, and let's hope it bites them back. But so let's move on now. So of course you remember the Sandy Hook settlement, right?
Yep.
The lawsuit was brought in Connecticut under the State Unfair Trade Practices Act. These things are kind of designed to wiggle around the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which prevents nonsense products liability actions against gun manufacturers when the items are used criminally. Well, what did we think was going to happen when they got away with it in Connecticut?
There'll be a whole flood of other ones.
Yeah,
and
again.
Had we talked about the story where it was after, I think it might have been the Aurora, Colorado shooting. There was, the Everytown lawyers swooped in and picked the family and like, we're going to file a lawsuit with you guys if you're okay with it. And of course, it was a frivolous lawsuit, and of course, it got throughout almost immediately. But then Everytown's lawyers disappeared, and then they left the family with the bill.
Right.
And
well, so this is also it's from the Boulder shooting, the grocery store shooting in 2021. They've brought a lawsuit structured very similarly to the Sandy Hook lawsuit, and they're literally saying we're taking that blueprint and we're applying it here, suing under the Connecticut Unfair Trade Practices Act again. And I don't even know what to say about it. It's
just
manic.
kind of silly. And I would say the one perhaps meritorious thing that Biden's executive order back on the previous story did allocate is they want to make it they want to make funding available to communities where mass shootings happen that are like disaster relief funds. So there's maybe some merit there, and that's maybe where these families should be seeking relief instead of like suing companies.
Well, no, because that would be that. Well, hold on, that might actually help.
Might actually help.
You might actually help. No, it's
helping's not allowed. Instead, what we should do is have anti-gun groups. You find these grieving families, and then fundraise off these families' griefs by saying, "Oh, we're filing a lawsuit to stick it to the NRA and the big bad gun companies." And then whenever these things fail, just like stick the family with hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees, and then tell them, "See you later. File for bankruptcy if you have any trouble."
The estate of one of the victims of that shooting is filing the lawsuit. It claims that the manufacturer, Ruger, promoted the image of the firearm as a combat weapon used to kill. Investigators said that this perpetrator passed a background check to legally buy a Ruger AR-556 pistol, which resembles an AR-15 rifle with a slightly shorter stock, 6 days before the shooting. Yeah. Well, anyway, but of course the Sandy Hook thing was a settlement, right? So there's a chance that this could be litigated and fixed, right? And have Connecticut not be just this like intense breeding ground of like a festering hole to chip away at the gun industry. Or it could just be that the result is the industry stops serving Connecticut.
Right. The thing that always strikes me as weird is like I can't remember the last time I saw one of these more, I'll call them try-hard gun ads where it's like the military uses our guns. I can't remember the last time I saw one of those and I was like, yeah, I want to buy that gun because of that. And maybe it's just me and I'm just not the target demographic, but like when Springfield says that their M1A is just like what your grandpappy carried in Vietnam, it doesn't make me want to buy an M1A. It just doesn't. When Daniel Defense is like, oh, they use our handguards, that's it. They don't use the rest of our gun, just the stupid handguard.
Right.
So we're totally legit. That doesn't make me want to buy their handguards or their guns. Like the sort of try hard advertisement seems like it's just going to end up getting them in trouble more than it's going to help them. Like, and I guess we've seen a little bit of this, although of course it can be played into too hard, like with what Walther did with the PDPF, where it's like this gun is for women to shoot people who rob their food truck.
Yep.
Like that's probably a little bit too on the nose
for lady bicycle cops.
For lady bicycle cops as well, but it's probably a little too on the nose there. But instead of like effectively as far as I am concerned, I don't think that they're driving many sales with ads like that, because maybe
I don't know, man. I think they might be.
Maybe I'm wrong, but
yeah, I think
I'd like to think they'd still be doing okay if they didn't. They didn't do these ads that are like the classic one is the Bushmaster. Consider your man card reissued. If you buy one of our now dirt cheap, poor quality control rifles that sold out our name entirely. But
well, who has good advertising?
Yeah,
because they pay for it on the show.
That's true. It's a
VCGrips.com. VCGrips.com supports everything we say unconditionally. Remember that.
That's true.
They have probably the best grips for handguns on the market, and I am going to be requesting one of their AR-15 grips. Let's check that out real quick. Rifle grips. Let's pick one today. Let's pick an AR-15 grip. What do you think? We got the VZ Hydra, the VZ Stipple, the VZ Recon, the VZ Operator 2, the Frag, the Diamond Slant, and the Alien. I'm thinking diamond slant. What are you thinking?
That's pretty nice. I liked the last time on the clearance there was that red, white, and blue one that also looked very nice.
Oh yeah, that was. Oh yeah, that was it. Is that still on clearance? Let's click on that. It looks like no. Oh no, but that was a 1911 grip. That was a 1911 grip.
Oh, that's right. It was.
But yeah. So, what do you think? The diamond slant. It's basically an A1 grip with a diamond pattern.
Yeah, it's got no thumb buster. That's it. Like the A2 grips where it has a little finger serration is like, at least for my fingers. Maybe if I had fatter fingers, it wouldn't be a problem. But like I just can't quite get 2 fingers above it, and with only 1 finger above it, it sucks.
Right. I never have an issue with it. I like A2 grips, but yeah, I'm definitely going to be checking out the diamond slant rifle grips. And guys, anything you want to check out on this wonderful Florida company, if you use promotional code ThisWeek15, that's THISWEEK15, you're going to get 15% off your order. That's a substantial savings, and that's a true value, if you ask me. So check out.
Get much for 15% off these days.
These days. So right, check out vzgrips.com. And be sure to use promotional code ThisWeek15. Support a good Florida company that supports the show. All right, so this next story is interesting. We always hear this is like a common anti-gun talking point where doctors need to find out if you have firearms in the home so that then the doctor can coach you on how to medically store your guns. Right? You've heard about that, right?
Yep.
So have you ever had a doctor ask you about guns?
Not in a medical capacity, no.
Oh, okay. I have once, and it was when they were like feeling my chest, and then they went down and they were like, "What is that?" And I said, "That's a gun." But, but that was about it. Yeah. So there's a new study has come out, and it's showing that these doctors are not doing their jobs. Healthcare providers rarely ask patients about access to firearms. And I think this is travestial.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Researchers surveyed 3,510 English-speaking adults living in 5 states as part of a Rutgers study and found, again, that they rarely screen their patients for firearms access, because we do know that access to firearms, this is what it says. Although we know that firearm access increases the risk for fatal injury for everyone in the home, healthcare providers are rarely asking about firearm access, said Allison Bond, a doctoral student at the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center and the lead author of the study. In order to prevent these injuries and deaths, healthcare providers need consider adding screening for firearms access into standard practice so that they're better positioned to then provide resources on secure firearm storage to the families that would most benefit from that information.
That's one of my least favorite anti-gun statistics, is that if you have a gun, you're more likely to get shot in the home. The way they constructed that statistic is by comparing families that don't have a gun where no one gets shot to families where there is a gun and people get shot. And it comes out to being like the same statistic where it's like having a pool in your backyard is like 1,000,000,000,000% more likely to have your kid drown in a pool. Well, yeah, that's true, because people who don't have a pool don't have the kid drown. Whenever you actually compare like the statistic chances of a kid drowning, it's still almost nothing.
Yeah. No, it's like, substantially more likely to die choking on hard candy type of thing.
Right.
But although, there is an inherent danger of pools, especially if you're negligent, right? So the presence of any instrumentality that could possibly cause harm combined with negligence, right? Like if you just let your 2-year-old wander around your backyard when there's a pool, I think the chances of them drowning in a pool will increase by perhaps 10 gorillion trillion percent.
Perhaps as much as.
Right. But yeah, so that was just a stupid thing. You guys can check that out in the show notes if you want. I'm just trying to get us through this because we got a lot of stories today, boys. Next up, and this is a good one from people that we're going to be talking about in just a second, from the Second Amendment Foundation. A federal judge in Texas has granted a preliminary injunction against the federal government's enforcement of the final rule regarding partially manufactured firearms parts and kits. In the case Vanderstock v. Garland, they're in the Fifth Circuit. So this preliminary injunction blocks enforcement of that rule. So effectively there, polymer 80s and stuff you're already starting to see being sold complete. So that's certainly a good thing. The court, I'll just read from Alan Gottlieb, the founder and executive vice president of SAF. The court's preliminary determination is pretty straightforward, and it notes that SAF and Defense Distributed are likely to succeed on the merits of their case against the receiver rule.
I know SAF had asked for an injunction for all of its members as well.
Right.
And they were denied that. And I really hated the judge's rationalization for why they wouldn't grant that. Because the judge said that they're granting the temporary injunction for the companies because they won't be able to make money if they don't get the injunction. And loss of sales isn't usually grounds for granting an injunction. That's not high on their criteria.
Right.
But the judge then identifies that because they're not making money on something that's constitutionally protected, or perhaps it is constitutionally protected, that then the companies get the injunction, but the little guy, nah, he doesn't get no injunction, because as if you as an individual selling these things aren't barred from doing that, right? You can't sell one to your buddy technically,
right? Well,
depending on how many,
depending on circumstances, right? And what you're thinking at the time. But preservation of the status quo is supposed to be a very, very premier motivation for granting a preliminary injunction in these types of situations. So I think I do disagree with that logic as well. But in any event, this is a good effort on the part of SAF, and certainly a step in the right direction, especially again with the note of likelihood of success on the merits. So that is pretty good. And may as well say it, but as you guys are aware, Fundbusters is partnered with Second Amendment Foundations. They are the only national gun rights group that, frankly, I support. For nearly 50 years, the Second Amendment Foundation has been fighting for your Second Amendment rights, having been involved in over 250 cases and an active litigation load of over 40 lawsuits. SAF has the expertise and experience necessary to fight government overreach and challenge unconstitutional laws. SAF, winning firearms freedoms one lawsuit at a time. To learn more or donate, click the link into the description or go to bit.ly/SAF-Busters. And throw them a few bucks. Why not? It's only money.
That's true. You can't take it with you.
Yeah, you can't. Unless you're Egyptian.
And then you can do that.
You can do that. All right, next up, another Fifth Circuit thing. A lot of you guys have been aware of the Fifth Circuit bump stock case, right? Where they actually won. The plaintiffs won the initial stage, and the Dallas Morning News is reporting that bump stock sales have resumed in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi after ATF misses a deadline to appeal the reversal. I'm not sure if they actually did miss the deadline.
So my understanding of this one, it's been very confusing the whole way along, and it's made that much more confusing by the guy who won the lawsuit, the guy
Cargill.
The inventor of the bump stock or whatever, at least this particular iteration of the bump stock. He like prematurely tweeted out the news, and then he was sort of confused about like dates and stuff, and then got a bunch of other people confused because he sort of broke the news, because it was his case. And they did certainly win, but the judge was at appeals, I believe, that this happened. So I think they lost at the initial state, and then on appeals they won, which is super cool to see.
So there was first they lost right in Austin, and then they lost again before a Fifth Circuit 3-judge panel, but then there was an en banc hearing of the full Fifth Circuit where they won,
and that's pretty impressive.
Yes, it's especially in a case like that. Usually when you go en banc, it's when you're going to get pee-pee slapped. But they're saying, they're saying the federal government had until last Monday to appeal. And when that deadline passed, the appeals court directed the lower court to execute this ruling.
Yeah, so from what I understand, they missed their deadline to appeal the reversal of the decision, but they still have time to appeal the original this actual ruling, case to the Supreme Court.
Right. Yes, because Now that the lower court will put in its ruling, they have,
until April 2nd, I believe, to appeal the ruling, which is that bump stock ban is bye-bye.
Right. So very interesting. And it'll be interesting to see what the government, I kind of feel like they won't.
I don't think they will. And this is like some fourth dimensional lawfare. And I know we talked about it. We talked about it a little bit earlier off air, but the sort of theories is that if the ATF doesn't appeal it, it will be true for the Fifth Circuit that the bump stock ban is gone.
Mm-hmm.
But for the rest of the circuits, it's not binding, but it is informative.
Yes.
So the only reason an appeals court or even a lower court at any of the other circuits would come up with a different opinion is if they thought that the en banc case in Texas in the 5th District was wrongly decided.
Right.
And that's usually not common. But if you ended up in front of an anti-gun judge, like you were caught with a bump stock and ended up in front of an anti-gun judge, it could probably mean a not good thing for you. Because of course they would they're not bound to what happened in the 5th Circuit. And so they'd listen to the anti-gun prosecutor say, oh, but machine gun bad, the gang in the movies, we can't have that.
Well, and on top of that, there is other circuit case law, right, going in favor of the bump stock ban and dangerously for the government under Chevron grounds,
right,
which the government kept trying not to argue. So it was like super fascinating the whole way around. But here's the thing, like here's the chess game. If you're the government, you've lost at the 5th Circuit, so you can go upstairs to the Supreme Court. Here's your options. Do nothing. It's binding in the 5th Circuit. You have countervailing case law in most of the rest of the country. So that's an option. Just kind of leave it alone. Appeal. Okay? Appeal to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court takes it up and sides with you, bam, you're presumptively good in the whole country. So you guys might be thinking, oh, well, certainly they're going to want to do that. Well, here's the thing. The rest of the options are not good for the government. So if you appeal and lose, then the whole thing's over nationwide.
You're done.
But if you appeal, and what happens in the vast majority of appeals to the Supreme Court, and the court declines to take certiorari, declines to take the case, that is going to be perceived by the lower courts as a mark of approval on this circuit's decision. So then when this is litigated in other circuits, they'll have the screen site saying, oh, well, the 5th Circuit found this way, and then they get to put the parentheses on the end saying cert denied.
Right.
Which tells the judge reading it, all right, well, so then that one must not be that bad. Let's see if any of the
it's a dangerous situation the ATFs found themselves in.
Right. Which is limitlessly entertaining to people like us.
It will be so interesting to see what they do. And I know I've seen some people hypothesizing, oh, if they appeal it to the Supreme Court could reverse the NFA. Yeah, well, could they? Sure. Will they?
Right.
No, probably
no.
not.
This is all about administrative law.
Right. And perhaps this isn't a bad avenue to see Chevron deference really get tore up, but I think the pistol brace thing is like, if with the pistol brace thing we can't win some victory against the NFA, if we could win some victory against Chevron, assuming the government argues it, I guess I haven't read in close detail any of their
pistol brace situation would be a way worse Chevron situation for the government, because that statute's pretty clear. Right. It defines all these terms.
They're not clarifying anything. They're changing definitions.
Yeah.
Which is an act of
adding
Congress
pages
thing.
upon pages upon pages. Right. Whereas the bump stock ruling added a sentence.
Right.
So anyway, so that'll be interesting. We definitely want to keep an eye on this, especially for the next 60 days.
And I'm going to do my soapbox. Do a little soapbox moment. Here we go.
He's going to scroll box.
All of the people with your little peanut brains, your little itty bitty baby brains, bitty little brains, little bitty brains, who sat there and did the bump stocks don't matter. Bump stocks don't put your, why would you even fly?
Yeah, get him.
I saw people like, and I know I don't want to come off as I was bashing Cargill for him being excited about the news that he'd won and going to Twitter with it.
Right.
But there was like people in his comments saying, "Oh, this isn't a victory. Bump stocks are a stupid gimmick. This is why are you celebrating this? You wasted so much money on this lawsuit. You should have been fighting a pistol braces. Why weren't you fighting pistol braces?
Yeah, you should have like seen it in the future."
And it's just like the most insane. Like there are people attacking the guy for beating the ATF, which is insane because like the guy could have just like kept his money, right? He made selling bump stocks. He could have just kept it. Yep, that's fine. I'm done. But like he went and fought to get bump stocks fixed. And so like all of the people with your little two-dimensional little pea brains, little brains the size of a grain of sand, who were like doing the whole, but bump stocks don't matter. Bump stocks don't matter. What do I care? Like this is why it matters, right? Because any victory that pushes back on executive overreach is a victory. The sort of groundwork, and of course at this stage it's not perfect groundwork, but the sort of groundwork that the bump stock case used to end up in a state of victory, at least as it stands now, is exactly how we would want the pistol brace thing to go. Hopefully it goes on a much more expedient timeline, but he's paved an avenue to show you like, look, this is how you win. These are what your arguments should be shaped like.
Right. Which I always like to say it. I wrote one of the earliest briefs about this in a case where they were going with a different line of reasoning. And I knew that this was the right way to do it. So good on you, Cargill. All right, next up, let's talk about some just nonsense, right? It's been a lot of heavy lifting and my arms are getting kind of tired. So one of the funny things that happen a lot in the gun community is, because let's be real about it, right? A lot of people get into firearms and have a nostalgia for the guns that they used in video games. Well, I saw this headline on T-Tag, which I love T-Tag. Dan Zimmerman's great. It's a good site on the web if you want a place to read gun news. The title was "Making a Real Halo M90 Shotgun." So I'm going to put this up on the screen here. And did you look at this one already?
Yeah, I saw this guy on YouTube. I think it showed up in my recommendations one morning. It's so good.
It's bogus. It does not look right. But he did. I mean, he tried. You know,
I mean, he took a shotgun and turned it upside down, which is what the Halo CE shotgun was, just like an upside down shotgun. So
yes,
with a mag tube up top and barrel on the bottom.
Yep, and it does look about as good as it could, I think. Being just an upside, what is that, an 870 just upside down?
Something like that.
Something like an 870 clone of some description. But yeah, I played a lot of Halo as a kid with friends both locally and online. Throughout the series, I've always been a fan of the M90 shotgun. Over the years, it's changed slightly, but it's largely been a unique style. It's an 8 gauge. It's like
the game is 8 gauge.
Yeah. He adapted a left-handed Remington Wingmaster by flipping it over and putting some stuff on it. But I think it's kind of cool. So yeah, you guys can check out that link down in the bottom where it goes through his whole process here. And he actually like employed some, he put a lot of time and attention into it. And I think he did a great job.
I think it's pretty cool.
I think it's pretty cool too. I think you're a nice guy, Mr. Dude. All right. Speaking of nice guys, it's MAF Corporation.
Yeah, especially it's not us. It's MAF Corporation.
MAF Corporation, MAF-arms.com. This is the best wind chime company out there. You got to go there. You're going to get some of the best prices on AR stuff ever. We're talking about stripped uppers for like in the 20s of dollars. The best merch. Look at this Big Mouse Small Arms corporate sticker. It's $1.95. Why not? Just give it a go. Just go in there, check it out. Anything you might be needing, just shop around, guys. And if you use promotional code FRN, you're going to get a discount. I don't think you're going to regret getting a discount. And of course, this is where you get the magic ATF ball. You could save yourself a lot of spilled ink on the letters, right? So yeah, check it out, maf-arms.com. So this next one's an interesting thing, also on T-Tag, or like this was a story, a global news story that was kind of memory hold really fast. Uh, did you hear anything about a shooting at a Jehovah's Witness hall in Germany?
I think I remember a headline. Since seeing this article, I think I remember seeing a headline, but like it didn't really get reported on at all.
No.
Like, straight to the memory hole.
Yep. So it was a Jehovah's Witness. They call them Kingdom Halls, I think. March 10th, 2023, shots were fired inside the building used by Jehovah's Witnesses in northern German city of Hamburg on Thursday evening, with multiple people killed and wounded. It's just really interesting seeing this get memory hold, right? Because everyone's always talking about it. This only happens in America. This only happens in America. And this, Alan Gottlieb here, speaking for the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, was quoted, "Anti-gunners who claim mass shootings don't happen anywhere but America are once again proven wrong. More importantly, they should acknowledge that restrictive gun laws do not prevent evil people from committing violent crimes, and that they leave innocent people vulnerable to deadly attacks. 6 people were murdered in the rampage, and then the killer, identified as Philip Fuss, took his own life. Published reports say he used a pistol which he legally owned. He reportedly had no criminal record and no links to terrorism, which would have disqualified him from owning a firearm." So, and it's not easy to get a handgun in Germany.
Right.
So,
I wonder, like, I know they can get like big handguns set up as rifles,
right,
and then modify them doing a big crime.
Right.
At least in the UK, like there's a whole underground market for, like, they cannot have handguns,
Right,
except with like the most restrictive license, which I don't think they even do grant anymore. But
right.
when it was granted, it was just for like people who are making movies that need pistols to make movies and stuff, and police sort of things like police training or whatever.
There's a lot of stuff with the like prohibited or like highly restricted items in the UK where it's like you have the license, you can own it, but you can't shoot it.
Right.
Like, period.
And
So,
they've got like 22 long rifle 1911s that have a stock and a barrel, extended barrel on them. But there's a great big black market for like people who then take those and illegally modify them, and then sell them to people who want
the Bringus.
And they want to sell them to people who want to look like Americans that just like have handguns.
Right. Yeah, no, because these handguns, the way they sell them is they have there's like an overall length, minimum overall length. So you'll see a 1911, a 22 1911 with this like 10-inch steel rod sticking out of the back, and they're not even using them as stocks because they could over there, right? They don't have that SBR thing, but there's just a little ball on the end, and then like a really long, super thin barrel, just so that it's long enough. And we'd be thinking, "Oh, cool, you should use that as stock." And they're like, "No, we don't want
to. We want a handgun.
We want a handgun." It's so interesting how, grass, other side, more yellow. But now finally, actually planned, Mr. Ivanov, we're going to update on the Illinois lawsuit, which fascinatingly we've been able to update on every time. And people are misunderstanding this news, as I understand it. Is that correct?
God, it's gone every direction. Like, it was already pretty confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'll go least confusing to most confusing here. There was there was briefs filed in the federal cases. So I think 4 federal cases that are consolidated in the south of the state. They're moving forward, and there's going to be a hearing coming up, I believe, later this month. And that's the hearing on the preliminary injunction. And the state made a couple of blunders in their response to the preliminary injunction. I don't know if we mentioned it last time, but the funniest one is like the judge had asked them to provide a illustrative example of one of everything that they banned, and they ended up then admitting that like they banned things that don't exist. So I think that certainly opens it to the arbitrary challenge, where if they ban something that doesn't exist, can't they just say that anything is that thing? Which is the sort of issue they may have run themselves into there. And so it's like the hurry up and wait with the federal cases then. Right. And all of our favorite anti-gun stooges are like drooling to file their briefs telling you about how bad 223s are in a law that doesn't ban 223s. It's very interesting.
Right.
But
so the judge signed an agreed order declaring the measure unconstitutional. So where's the issue here? This is a specific Illinois weirdness.
The state cases have been very weird.
Yeah.
So there was the cases that had been run by Tom DeVore where he had initially won on procedural issues and then also won on a 14th Amendment claim that because you're exempting wardens, but you're not exempting ex-military, that's kind of weird because wardens have no training and ex-military do have training. And you're saying that the basis for this discrimination is their level of training. So what's up with that? And so they won in front of 3 judges, and then they won in front of 1 judge, and then it went up to the appellate level. And at the appellate level, they said, we're not the court to decide procedural things. That's the Supreme Court's purview. But we do agree with you on the 14th Amendment thing. So then DeVore, I mean, he won, right? So he earns this. He in my mind, earns this. But he then went and shopped around, and for $200, you could pay him $200 to be a plaintiff on one of his cases. And since he'd already won at the appellate level, he can go to any lower court, and they have to follow what that appellate court did. And so he essentially got $200 from a bunch of people since he'd already put in the work and then did this. Right. Meanwhile, way upstate in Macon County, a Illinois state representative, along with a couple of pro-gun lawyers, essentially copy-pasted DeVore's sort of magic formula there. And then in a Macon County court, they filed essentially an identical lawsuit, except they added one complaint, which was a minor thing, and I think was also a 14th Amendment angle.
And this is what we're talking about right here, the Macon judge.
Correct. And so they like massively expedited this lawsuit, and I don't even think they had done arguments yet. And the judge was like, "Oh, because this decision was already decided by an appellate court downstate, I think I agree with it. Why don't the plaintiffs, so this representative and his lawyer, why don't you guys give me what you think my order should look like, and then I'll go ahead and sign something." And so they essentially drafted an order and put it in front of the judge that said that the Illinois salty weapons ban is entirely unconstitutional. And it's like, before there was any arguments in the court, before any paper trail was built, before there was any sort of a discovery or fact finding going on, the judge signed an order that said that the law was facially unconstitutional. It's like the judge.
Well, and this was an agreed order,
right?
Like the government consented to.
Right. And so the judge signs this final order saying this law cannot possibly stick around. And the state then agrees to this. And of course, the state's options are you get drugged through the same process where it ends up being found. The lower courts are always going to find this 14th Amendment claim enticing because the lower courts are probably sympathetic to the Second Amendment argument, but you can't make the Second Amendment argument in a state court because then they're going to remove you to federal court where you can argue it there.
Yeah, because the Illinois state right to arms is kind of worthless, right?
Well, it does. The Illinois state does have a Second Amendment equivalent, and it even says specifically an individual right to keep and bear arms.
Right, but wasn't it like gutted by the Illinois Supreme Court at one point?
Yes, the Illinois Supreme Court has utterly gutted it. And in fact, they've decided that the individual right to keep and bear arms, and Illinois' Second Amendment doesn't mention a militia at all, but the Illinois State Supreme Court decided that, the individual right to keep and bear arms is for a militia. They worked that one in there real good. Yep. So the Second Amendment claims don't really work in Illinois state court. And so this essentially expedited this Macon County case, which has no discovery, no fact finding, no arguments, no nothing, to get to the Supreme Court, the Illinois State Supreme Court. Right. And this, of course, made Tom DeVore mad, and he was calling everybody a bunch of names and stomping his feet, and perhaps rightly so, because he totally did just get his homework stolen. Like they literally copied his homework and didn't even make it look like they changed it.
But hey, bro, it's in the public record.
Right. And so and maybe DeVore's right to stomp his feet about that, but the sick irony of this whole thing is the depth of Illinois' corruption definitely extends to the Supreme Court level. It's been this way for quite some time, and part of the biggest issue is the Illinois State Supreme Court is made up of elected justices. And these elected justices are meant to represent particular areas in the state, but of course it's like Chicago and Springfield politicians who buy the justices' seats, right? With massive amounts of lobbying and fundraising. So like politicians who aren't from the region where these justices are meant to be elected from, get them elected in those regions, which is, I mean, it's all colors of screwed up. But in the past Illinois state legislative session, our wonderful governor signed a bill that limited financial contributions to people running in the state to $500,000. No one person can give more than $500,000 to get anybody elected. and everybody was okay with that because yes, we're getting money out of Illinois politics. Isn't that great? And it was not even a couple of months after the governor signs this that he ends up giving $1 million each to 2 different candidates for the Supreme Court. Once $500K from himself, and once $500K from a trust that's literally his name trust.
Right.
It's different. Like the JB Pritzker Trust. Yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
Money is out of our politics.
Legally
don't even worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We can just make another trust.
It would just might as well give them $3 million each with another trust. Yeah. And so, like, certainly this is an issue. And there's even a Supreme Court case, which is essentially found that if there are significant political donations to a person who ends up being a defendant on a lawsuit, the judges, if the person who's a defendant gave a significant amount of money to a judge who's then hearing a case, the judge is expected to recuse themselves. Is what the Supreme Court ended up finding. And this was particularly an issue where a judge had received a ton of money from a CEO of a company who ended up being a defendant, and the judge sided with the CEO. And then this got appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court reversed the whole decision just because the judge didn't recuse themselves, which is kind of funny. But
yeah, I like that.
There's these 2 judges who won their judgeships on the Illinois State Supreme Court after receiving $1 million each from our get money out of politics governor.
Good.
And they are not recusing themselves in this case where the first named defendant is the governor.
Right. So
maybe there's just some sliver of hope that, like, it's their decision comes down so obvious, right. So obviously one-sided on the behalf of the governor that there's a higher court that will look at this and go, yeah, recusal should have happened here. What's up with that? But that's a very, very slim chance. And as mad as Tom DeVore was, the chances of a 14th Amendment argument in front of the Illinois State Supreme Court isn't bad, right? It's a progressive leaning court. So a 14th Amendment argument's not bad. A 14th Amendment argument about guns is going to have no chance whatsoever. It will not happen. They will never, ever let the 14th Amendment's protections make an umbrella for guns to exist under, because that would be absolutely devastating for everything that they want to see done in this state.
And again, that being a equal protection argument,
right? You can't have they can't allow equal protections for guns to exist because they end up exempting categories of people who have oftentimes equivalent training to, like, if you have your carry license in Illinois, you've gone through the minimum, you've gone through the minimum level of firearms proficiency training as cops who are exempted from everything. So they absolutely cannot. And broadly speaking, it would be interesting to see more precedent built for 14th Amendment challenges to Second Amendment issues.
It's very interesting.
It's a very enticing thing. Yeah. And certainly is not going to be able to stand up here, because 14th Amendment could be a very powerful thing for any right. But
it ought to be, but
they're not going to let you do 2 rights at once. The courts hate when you do 2 rights at once.
Well, although that's like the whole point of it. Like, the constitutional structure is really interesting here, but in any event, this is definitely something we have to keep our eye on. Speaking, though, of getting money out of politics, why don't you guys take some of that money out of politics and send it on over to patriotpatch.co. I just got in the latest patch, and it is Ireland themed. Would you look at that? It's a orange-haired young lady with a suppressed fowl and a Beretta. Yeah, that I wouldn't want to shoot that fowl, I don't think.
Classic Italian firearms, Italy being the country of the leprechaun.
I don't think I'd want to shoot a suppressed fowl. Fowl's like a normal fowl pisses gas on you. I don't know. What do you think? Would you want to shoot a suppressed fowl?
Wants to say I did it.
Yeah, but I do really like fouls. I am on the foul side in the foul versus G3 debate. But of course, you shouldn't be on either of those sides. You should be on the 4956 side, because that is the superior firearm.
We're all allowed to have wrong opinions sometimes.
But anyway, guys, patriotpatch.co. Join the Patch of the Month Club. Use promotional code TWIG10. That's TWIG10 for 10% off your order. They've got all kinds of cool stuff on here. I love their cleaning mats. They've got all kinds of patches, from movies and different things that you guys like. But the Patch of the Month Club is what I really recommend. Automatically, every month, you'll get a new patch. It's kind of a nice surprise. I definitely like getting these. because it's always it's kind of like a loot box, but you get a little PVC Bringus instead of a digital depression. So check them out. And when you join the Patch of the Month Club, they also give you a sticker and a little art card. So the sticker is like a higher quality version of the art that's on the patch, and the art card is a line drawing of the original art that went into the patch. So again, patriotpatch.co. Thank you for supporting the show. You guys check them out. Well, that's it for today, everybody.
Well,
I was about to say, unless my rat para illegal has some parting wisdom.
We forgot to address like the one big controversial thing about this Illinois decision, where the judge declared the law unconstitutional.
Yeah,
but he didn't specifically enjoin the state police or anyone in the state from enforcing the law.
Right.
So it's so I mean, if you are a cop and or especially if you're a police chief and you know that your police minions are your little police guys carry insurance against violating people's rights, and
which is called qualified immunity.
But in some cases actual insurance.
Yeah.
You certainly don't want to be telling them go enforce this thing that a judge just said was unconstitutional, because insurance doesn't cover that when it happens.
Right.
So like if they do an oopsie doopsie slip up and then put somebody in jail for that, that's kidnapping is what that is. Yep. Should a judge agree with you, and then you'd end up owing that person a large sum of money. So it's not no gun companies are sending mags or ARs into the state to be sold to people at this point, because they're like shy about it still.
Right.
But it's sort of in this limbo state, and it's probably the state wouldn't have agreed to this order.
Well, that's probably why the order came out the way it did.
Right. The order probably, and so it's ambiguous, and ambiguity always works on the side of the state in instances like this. So there's a lot of headlines saying that it applies a whole statewide and that the whole state's been granted relief. Well, it does apply statewide, certainly does. Nobody's contesting that, but it doesn't grant relief explicitly.
Follow it. Yeah.
Right.
So it says it's unconstitutional. And this is what Stocks, which I believe is one of the attorneys, right? He said, and this is what kind of shows you it's weird, because he's explaining so hard that they won.
Right.
Well-established Illinois authority provides that a law declared unconstitutional pursuant to a facial challenge is void as if the law never existed, and is unenforceable in its entirety in all applications. Which, like, the fact that you're explaining, right, is the concern. So that is why we're not seeing statewide returns to normalcy. But there are still a bunch of other lawsuits going on, so who knows what's going to
and the federal cases are probably the more likely to succeed ones, because they've got Bruin on their side, and they've got the burden the state has to reach in the federal cases is so high, it's so difficult. We're seeing California fail to reach it. We're seeing in Maryland they're failing to reach it. And those decisions are going to come down around the same time as Illinois does. It's going to be amazing. There's going to be like multiple freedom weeks coinciding, even maybe it'll be fantastic, and maybe even freedom months. It'll be wonderful. We will love to see it when it happens. But
maybe even freedom forevers. But I think we're too cynical to.
Could I have a cube of cheese?
Yeah, can I have one crumb of freedom? Can I have a sliver of human dignity? Can you please not lock me in a cage for decades for this box?
Mayhaps may I have this long box with a spring?
I would like the longer box spring, if you please. But yeah, no. So I was kind of wondering why what was taking you so long to get to that, but I'm glad you did.
Yeah, so for people wondering, that's the reason your gun store won't sell you the long box cheese spring is because you haven't been a good rat
in Illinois, of course. Yeah, it was because you are not a good rat. That is why the order did not go as far as it could have.
And of course, the state's burden in these state cases is essentially they have to show up to court and go, "Your Honor, public safety," and then sit back down, and the judges on the Supreme Court will nod their heads and go, "Yes, public
safety."
14th Amendment doesn't exist if a public safety.
That's true. Well, okay. So or is there any more parting wisdom?
That's it.
Okay.
That's all of my wisdom. That's my entire brain power right there. Is the cheese cube box.
Well, that's big. Well, thank you all so much for coming. And as always, we will see you next time.